We are here today to talk about cryptocurrency, shadowy financial system that is fueling crime, both white collar crime and violent crime. And I'm honored to be here today with State Senator Myrie, who's been a leader across a number of subjects, partner to all New Yorkers, including this office, and has two bills that we're going to talk about today that would really give prosecutors like me in our office great tools, and Adam Maltz, who's a deputy in our cybercrime unit who has deep expertise, and we'll talk to you about some of our work. Let me just table state with the scope. Cryptocurrency is a major industry. We're talking $3.1 trillion. That's a cap size that is double that of Meta, billions more than the GDP of Brazil, and it is awash in crime. We know that $51 billion tied to illicit address and crime. That was 2024, and that is up considerably for 2020, $11 billion. So it's alarming and it's growing, and it is such an issue because when we think about traditional money laundering, with money going through our brick and mortar banks, we have regulations, we have rules. They must know who their customers are. They must look for and root out and detect fraud, literally having to do reports called suspicious activity reports, which for us in law enforcement are blueprints that help us do our work. Cryptocurrency, we have actors who are operating outside of that regulatory scheme, and that is what we need to fix. Senator Myrie's bill that we're here to talk about today would give us great tools. We have people who are operating unlicensed virtual currency business actors, and if they were licensed, they would then need to operate within the structures, knowing who their customers are, and generating suspicious activity reports. We do have civil penalties, but we do not have criminal penalties. And I know from my experience in other types of work, wage theft, for example, where civil regulation enforcement is good and it's helpful, but some of those actors price in those penalties, criminal liability, and those consequences are drivers. So this bill would introduce criminal penalties if you were moving $1 million of crypto. It would be a C felony, 5 to 15 years imprisonment, and it's layered in terms of the amount of money tiered to the level of crime. And this would bring us in line with 18 other states and in the federal system to operate and move money without a license is punishable by up to 5 years. And so this would be a significant step forward. I thank Senator Myrie for his leadership. I'm also thanking him for the Rip-Off Act, which I hope he'll address as well, which is another bill he's already introduced it that would help us to recover stolen cryptocurrency. There are real people, New Yorkers, Manhattanites, who are being harmed, who cannot get their money back. We spent a lot of time working on it. The Rip-Off Act would give us tools to put more money back, return stolen money. And so with that, and my deep gratitude, turn it over to Senator Myrie.
Thank you, DA Bragg. And, let me thank you and the office for the incredible work that you're doing and the leadership in this space. You know, you mentioned crypto, and oftentimes people's eyes widen, perhaps thinking about an opportunity to make money, or the eyebrows are raised in suspicion of the credibility of this system. And the extremes of those views are probably not true. People think that it is only crypto bros that are getting ripped off or that are being scammed. But the truth is the illicit activity associated with cryptocurrency, the scams that are happening almost on a daily basis, are happening to everyday New Yorkers. Like most people, there are people that are looking for love, and they get in an engagement with someone that they think has a romantic interest in them, and it turns out that this person is simply there to scam them and rip them off. You have someone that may look to a legitimate opportunity to make money. They get a call by an AI generated entity, and they are fooled and scammed into thinking that this is an opportunity. And as the DA mentioned, there are some structures in place. There is a regulatory framework that exists. New York, many years ago, I think led the nation in trying to set up some guardrails for this. But there is an illicit market. There is something happening outside of the confines of our regulation, and there are no penalties for bad behavior. So I am really excited and proud to be here with DA Bragg to say, look, the bad guys are working hard. We are going to work harder. Our laws cannot be stuck in the last century. Before there was internet, before there was email, our scheme to defraud statutes were made. Before technology has advanced to what it is today, let alone blockchain technology, our laws have not caught up. So I am really looking forward to getting this done this legislative session because the consequences are real. Everyone is talking about affordability these days, and rightfully so. This is the frontier happening right now on affordability. People who've saved up for their entire lives so that they can provide food and comfort for their families are having that ripped away through illicit cryptocurrency behavior. So I'm really grateful. I'm looking forward to getting this done and appreciate your leadership on this, DA.
Thank you, Senator. And so 88 Maltz has done a lot of work in this area, tried 2 significant cases, and has deep expertise. And so he's going to walk you through a little bit of Crypto 101 and then work that we're doing, and you'll see how this bill would really help us.
Back in 2020, you had $11 billion being received in illicit transactions, according to reports at the time. That number has jumped to $51.3 billion as of 2024. And I want to talk a little bit for a moment about what that 51.3 billion number consists of. But before I do that, I should mention that that number is inherently undercounts. It undercounts the nature of fraud because those are only the illicit addresses that we know about. And undoubtedly, there are many more addresses that we don't know about that are engaging in fraud that are not represented by that number. And we know that from our investigations because often we investigate cases and we find illegal cryptocurrency being moved, criminal proceeds being moved in the form of cryptocurrency. It's not accounted for in that number. So that is a under-inclusive number of the total scope of that fraud. But what is that? What is that 51.3 billion plus number? There's a couple of buckets, and this is not inclusive of every type of crime, but it is a big group of the crime. Number one is stolen cryptocurrency. You heard Senator Myrie talk about the investment scams and the romance scams. They're referred to sometimes as pig butchery, and that is a major problem affecting victims who are losing their livelihoods, losing their homes, losing their retirement savings. More recently, we have a lot of exchange impersonation scams. You may have gotten some of those text messages yourself, purporting to be legitimate exchanges, Coinbase or Gemini, when in fact it's just a scammer attempting to convince you to move your cryptocurrency off of the platform that you hosted in so that it can be stolen. You have wallet poisonings, which are sophisticated scams that use malicious addresses. Just like someone can log into your Chase account and steal money, you have unauthorized access to legitimate exchange accounts where cryptocurrency is stolen. Malware and extortion in the form of crypto locker viruses. And then what we see recently is that when a person has their phone stolen outside of a bar in Manhattan, instead of using that phone to purchase Apple products or gift cards, they're stealing the cryptocurrency off that phone. And lately there have also been a series of kidnappings, including some investigated by this office, where people are being kidnapped in order to give up the keys and the access to their cryptocurrency wallets. And these are just some of the type of ways that cryptocurrency is stolen. And the reason why criminals prefer to steal cryptocurrency off your phone as opposed to cash is because how easy it is to launder transactions and because the transactions are irreversible. I want to show for those of you who haven't seen it, this is a video showing what it's like to send a transaction, how fast it is to send a transaction if you have a cryptocurrency wallet. So I'm going to play this, and this is happening in real time. The person enters their password, they click the send button, they copy the Bitcoin address in this case that they want to send to, they copy the amount, in this case it was $1, and they copy the recipient and hit send, confirm, and that's it. And this was a $1 transaction, but there's no reason that that couldn't have been $1,000, $10,000, or $1 million transaction. And that transaction, once it happens, unlike in the context of a bank, is irreversible. It's not coming back. It cannot be clawed back like, say, a wire transfer was. And it took all of 15 seconds to do. So that is one area where we see criminal proceeds being generated in the form of cryptocurrency. Another is the sale of controlled substances, primarily on the dark web, but not exclusively on the dark web. At the top, you see a list of some modern dark web marketplaces. Drug Hub, Abacus Market, and Black Ops Market are 3 active right now. And they sell a variety of product. You see the specific products listed under Abacus Market: benzos, cocaine, ecstasy, heroin, ketamine, LSD. And I'll mention that although you don't see fentanyl being openly advertised on these marketplaces, the undercover purchases our investigators have done show that in fact the heroin that you're buying on those marketplaces will in fact likely be laced with fentanyl. So even if fentanyl is not being advertised for sale, it is being sold. And you have the vendors that are operating in these marketplaces. These are 3 investigations that we have done, and they are sophisticated actors in this space. On the left, you have Fire Bunny. That was a dark web vendor that did $7.2 million in revenue in the few years it was in operation. You have SynMed, which was done by our office several years ago. OVO Sweatshop, operated out of both New York operated out of New York and New York County and in Rochester. And you have Next Day Gear, which operated here as well. And I wanted to point out that these are sophisticated organizations that use complex money laundering techniques. On the table there in the center, you see a little gray box. That box is a Faraday box. It's the same type of thing that we would use in our forensic lab to prevent activity, cell activity into cell phones. So basically to hide yourself when you're traveling. The defendant in the OVO investigation was traveling with that box. When he went to make drug pickups, he would place his cell phone in the box so that we couldn't track his cell signal as he was going. So these are highly complicated, highly sophisticated organizations. But drugs aren't the only thing that you buy with crypto. You also buy personal identifying information on what are called carding shops. Carding shops will sell stolen credit card, and they'll sell what are called fulls. Fulls are everything that you need to steal someone's identity. Your name, your date of birth, your social security number, your phone number, and your account information, your credit card information. And these are openly being actively sold on marketplaces like Sictor CC and V Club. Those are 2 marketplaces that our office recently took down the websites of, but there's still a lot that are out there that are operational. And I'll mention that these carding shops and the dark web marketplaces really exploded because of cryptocurrency. Because now you could make your payments anonymously in a way you couldn't before the advent of crypto. CSAM, we see people purchasing child sexual abuse material using cryptocurrency. And then not everything has to happen on the dark web or the clear web. There's also just relationship-based transactions, or transactions where you meet people on Telegram. And instead of paying them in cash, or paying them by wire transfer, or Venmo, or Zelle, you're actually paying in crypto. So means of exchange for contraband is another large bucket where we see that $51 billion number come from. The last one I'm going to talk about today is the money laundering using cryptocurrency. So these are crypto organizations that don't generate proceeds in crypto, but want to launder the cash that they've received from their criminal activity. A few are listed there: identity theft and SIM swapping, etc. And these organizations generate large amounts of cash that they turn into crypto so that it can be laundered, so that it can be hidden, and so that it can be moved overseas. So this is a video we have from one of a case that I did several years ago. It was an investigation into an individual named Robert Taylor. He was running an illegal Bitcoin kiosk business, which I'll talk about in a minute, a totally unregulated Bitcoin kiosk business. And this was the cash that he filmed himself that was taken from his kiosks that was generated from criminal activity. just to be clear, we didn't make that video. He made that video and kept it on his Snapchat account that he was operating, using to operate his virtual currency kiosks. So all of these businesses make use of all of these criminal actors make use of virtual currency businesses to allow the laundering of the funds they're making and to move the funds they're making. And virtual currency businesses, as Senator Myrie mentioned and the DA mentioned, are already regulated by DFS under the BIT license regime. The problem is that there is not a criminal penalty for not having a virtual currency license. So what are these virtual currency businesses? I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but they're in one part businesses that do fiat, which means government-backed currency, US dollars, euros, Chinese yen, to crypto conversions, right? That's one bucket of these virtual currency businesses. Examples of that are online exchanges, Coinbases and Geminis. People go onto those online exchanges, they make accounts, and most of these online exchanges and most of the good actors in the space, they do all the things a bank would do. They take your ID, they make sure you are the person you say you are, they monitor your traffic, they look for suspicious activities, they report on suspicious activities. But some do not. Some are no KYC exchanges, and some don't do any checking whatsoever. Then you have virtual currency kiosks. Those look like Bitcoin ATMs. There's actually one in the corner of the room that we see is right over there. They look like an ATM, and what you do is you go to the kiosk and you put money in, you tell the kiosk where you want your Bitcoin or whatever virtual currency you're buying to be sent, and you press send and it goes there. Some of these kiosks also licensed, operate within the regulatory environment. They take a picture of your ID, they take a picture of the person. But some of them, like the one operated by Mr. Taylor that I previously mentioned, do not. They don't collect any information, and they specifically advertise at people who don't want to be known. They advertise the anonymity of their services.
And Adam, let me just jump in, correct me if I get it wrong, but for the unregulated, right, because I think the cost structure will tell you that the actors know that they're doing something wrong. You know, for the online exchange, you know, a legitimate one that's operating within the regulatory structure, the cost for the transaction is 0.1%, just like if you were to change your dollars to euros. The ask no questions Bitcoin ATMs, 20% of the transaction.
So, yeah, that's exactly right, Mr. Bragg. You can get fees as low as 0.1% from an exchange. You're never paying more than, say, 4% on an exchange transaction. The investigation we did into Mr. Taylor's kiosks, he charged on average 17% and fees as high as 20% for his transactions. So the only people who are using those unlicensed, unregistered kiosks are the people who are trying to hide themselves, hide who they are, and not come onto law enforcement's radar. The last kind of bucket of ways to convert crypto to fiat and fiat to crypto virtual currency business is peer-to-peer or over-the-counter. So local CoinSwap is an example of that. It's a website that you can go on, like a Craigslist, and find people who are willing to buy and sell you virtual currency for a fee. And that fee can also, it's high, can range between 4 and 12%. And you might meet that person in an alleyway or a parking lot, literally hand them cash, and they send you crypto. Or you might send them a Cash App or a Venmo from a stolen account, and then they send you crypto in response. And these peer-to-peer traders and brokers are never licensed. They never do KYC. They don't care who their customers are. They don't care if the transactions are suspicious, because that is their precise business model. And what this statute is trying to address is this entire network of unregulated and unlicensed businesses. So what is the difference between those good actors like the Coinbases of the world that take licenses and the unlicensed businesses? And DA Bragg has already alluded to this. The licensed virtual currency businesses do KYC on their customers. They monitor for suspicious transactions. They file suspicious activity reports, and they file reports on transactions over $10,000. They have an anti-money laundering program. They prevent customers or customers having transactions with Treasury-sanctioned entities like terrorist groups, and they have to keep and preserve books and records. And they're required to do so by the BIT license regime and by federal law. But there's a whole network of those that don't do so. And they don't do any of those things because their businesses are designed not to do those things. So where do these virtual currency businesses fit into the flow of funds in these criminal enterprises? At the very top of this chart, you have placement. So you have two sides of the placement. One is those sides when you have the criminal proceeds being generated in US dollars, right? So then you have to convert your US dollars into crypto so that it can enter to this money laundering regime. Two, the criminal transactions can already be in crypto. But either way, you're gonna send those crypto to your crypto wallets. After you have the funds in crypto, you have to obfuscate it. You have to mix it. You have to make it so that law enforcement can't track it. And there's ways to do that, which we'll talk about in a second. And lastly, you have to integrate those funds by converting the crypto back into fiat so you can spend it. Today, you still can't really live your life in crypto. You can't pay your mortgage. You generally speaking can't buy a car. So you want to take the criminal proceeds that you have generated in crypto or in dollars and get it back into dollars or whatever currency you're using so that you can spend it and live your life. I want to start by talking about placement and specifically the conversion of dollars into crypto. And we've already talked about that. The way you do that is through the online exchanges, the virtual currency kiosks, and the peer-to-peer traders, or that's three of the major ways that you do that. And I want to talk about two of those in particular. Virtual currency kiosks. This was the investigation to Mr. Taylor. The virtual currency kiosk is in the corner there. The only information on that kiosk identifying who was the operator was a Snapchat account. There was no name, no business name, nothing, just a Snapchat account. And the two images you see on the screen are what he was posting on his Snapchat account. Initially, he was advertising his new Bitcoin machine at 518 West 145th Street. Then, as time progressed and he became more concerned about law enforcement, he would just say there was a new one in Far Rockaway or West Flatlands, direct message me for location. And he, as I mentioned, was openly advertising the anonymity of his machines. This is a video from that same Snapchat account, an advertisement that he made for customers.
I only buy Bitcoins from the niggas in the laundromats. These racks only go into the machine with no ID and no cameras.
Only go into the machines with no IDs and no cameras. Because that was the service that he was providing. And who did he attract? A criminal clientele. The very first person we surveilled, that we identified in surveillance of his kiosks, was driving a stolen U-Haul. Almost everyone we identified using his kiosks were in fact committing some form of identity theft or other crime. Now, this was an investigation our office did a few years ago into Victoria Jacobs. Our counterterrorism unit did this investigation and prosecuted her and convicted her after trial. And Ms. Jacobs was trying to get funds over to Syria to support a terrorist organization. And she also used virtual currency kiosks in her financial transactions. But we were able to identify who she was because the virtual currency kiosk that she used at the time, Cottonwood Vending, actually did what it was supposed to do. It took a picture of her, and that's a picture of her using the kiosk. It did the customer verification. So if she had used Mr. Taylor's machines, there would have been no record of that transaction ever existing. Only because she used one of these regulated licensed entities were we be able to identify who she was in this particular transaction. I should stop for a second. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to peer-to-peer traders about kiosks or exchanges?
Like a million, but not that.
We'll save some time at the end.
Yeah, I can't even formulate.
So peer-to-peer traders. So one way to get crypto is to put cash into a kiosk. Another is to use an exchange. The third is to use a peer-to-peer trader. This was an investigation and prosecution I did into an individual named Thomas Speaker. He was actually pled guilty a couple of years ago. And this was his Facebook post from 2018. Do you want to stay completely off the radar? Buy or sell through me today. I've been selling all forms of crypto, P2P, peer-to-peer, since 2014. And Mr. Speaker would meet up, he would advertise on a place called Local Bitcoins that doesn't exist anymore. It's a way to trade cash for crypto. He would meet up with people in person. He would trade them cash for crypto. And then he was basically functioning like a money launderer. One of his customers was a overseas organized crime group. He would fly across the country, pick up $40,000 to $50,000, and then take the train back with the $50,000 to deposit it, to have his accomplices deposit it into bank accounts so that it can be turned into crypto. So he, like the other, like the unlicensed Bitcoin kiosk operators, were advertising for this criminal clientele and operating entirely off of the radar. And it wasn't just fraud that he was laundering. He was laundering for dark web drug dealers. He was laundering for romance scams. He was laundering in SIM swappers, for SIM swappers. So he was laundering for every type of crime type that you could imagine. People who wanted to turn their cash into crypto or crypto into cash and not provide any sort of identification. All right, so I'm gonna talk now about the second stage. So now you're the criminal actor, you have the funds, they've been converted to crypto, you need to obfuscate that crypto. You need to layer, you need to hide the origin of the funds you're moving. Because one of the things about most cryptocurrencies, not all, but most, is that although they're considered anonymous, they're only pseudo-anonymous. They can be tracked across the blockchain, and our office has and regularly does track the flow of funds. This is an example of a graph of how we track flow of funds. On the left side of this graph, you have the exchanges where the cryptocurrency started, and at the end you have the destination. And we're literally watching the transactions as they occur over the blockchain. And this is a Bitcoin, so it's easier to track. There are currencies that are not like that. So what the criminals do is they look for ways to obfuscate so that we aren't able to do this kind of tracking from point A to point B. And there's a couple of ways they do that.
Just that was a very fair to say on that one. That when we're tracking, we can see the money move, but we unless it's like the Victoria Jacobs where we've had some evidence because they've operated sort of in the traditional system in some way, someone within the regulatory scheme. We see the money, but we don't necessarily know who it is.
That's a great point, Bragg. So, right, these are just dots on a graph. It doesn't have a name next to any of these dots. The way that we can figure out who's actually behind any of these particular addresses is if on this side of the graph, it's Coinbase, and we can send a subpoena to Coinbase to learn who the person is. Or if on this side of the graph, it's one of those legitimate kiosks, so we can learn who the person on the other side of it is. And if these sides of the graphs are the unlicensed actors, then it just looks like another black dot. And there's no way to tell who's on the other side of the transaction, and no way to de-anonymize the transactions.
I'm gonna hide on the jump anymore, but I'm gonna make the plug for the bill, right? So you see how helpful the bill would be, right? Because we're doing all of this, but we're relying on people or entities, being within the regulatory structure and following the rules. If someone's not following the rules, we know who it is. Senator Myrie's bill says you gotta do this and you're not licensed. If they're not licensed and there's a criminal penalty, we can then investigate them just for not being licensed and hold them accountable for all this money moving around. Think of this as human trafficking, as drug dealing, as gun trafficking. This money moving around is not, to as you said, finance your mortgage. This is all, problematic.
So how do you hide who you are on the blockchain? There's a couple ways. There's mixing and tumbling. Mixers or tumblers are websites or services that are designed to obfuscate the flow of funds. You send the coin in as one type, it comes out from an entirely different location as something else. They have no function other than to obfuscate. That is what they are designed to do. And they are actively operating. This bill would make them required to get a virtual currency license if they're operating in New York State. And they will never go get that license because that is not their business model. Their business model is not to look for suspicious transactions. They, in fact, they support the suspicious transactions. They don't want to know who their customers are. So we would be able to prosecute mixers and tumblers that operated in our jurisdiction, and that means with New York customers, if this bill was passed. Instant exchanges. Those are non-custodial swapping service. They're not necessarily designed to obfuscate, but they serve that exact function because they allow the off-chain conversion of funds from one type to another. No KYC exchanges I talked about. Those are exchanges that are out there that allow you to do crypto to crypto transactions and even crypto to fiat transactions, crypto to US dollars, without collecting any KYC on their customers. You have chain hopping, that's moving coins between different networks to obfuscate the flow of funds. And you have privacy coins, cryptocurrencies like Monero or Zcash that, unlike Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, or others, were actually designed for anonymity. So back to DA Bragg's point, the virtual currency business bill would make it so that these no KYC exchanges, instant exchanges, and tumblers could not operate without doing the diligence that everyone else in the structure is required to do. It's just bringing them in line with what is already required and giving us a way to prosecute them when in fact they don't do so. So now I'm going to go to the last kind of piece of this flow of funds, integration, and that's when you're converting the cryptocurrency back into fiat currency. So now that you can live your life. And the truth is that happens in exactly the same ways that we've already talked about, right? You can do it through the exchanges, you can do it through foreign exchanges if you're overseas, and you can do it peer-to-peer, and we've seen everyone using all of those services to do so. One other thing I didn't mention, it might not be on a website. It could just be a Telegram group that you know, or people that you meet in Telegram that you're interacting with to do those kinds of transactions. So you're cashing in and cashing out through the same sources, but now the funds have been obfuscated through the techniques that I previously talked about. So Coinbase or Gemini or Binance might not know who it is that's on the other side of the transaction because you successfully have laundered it already. This is an example of cashing out. This is that same counterterrorism investigation where the subject, that's the wall in the middle, send funds over to a cryptocurrency exchange in Idlib, Syria called Bitcoin transfer. That was actually investigated and seized by the federal government. And you can see the discussion that the subject of the investigation, Victoria Jacobs, had with her handler overseas. There is one company which me and Abu Salman used for transfers. Yes, Bitcoin transfer was cheaper. That company is Western Union, because in the past, you would send funds using Western Union. But later we switched with him to Bitcoins. Somebody used to exchange Bitcoins for him, and that's the Bitcoin transfer. So it's the flow of funds from the United States to support terrorism over to Idlib, Syria, using the cash out point of Bitcoin transfer overseas. And this is the flow of funds we see not always to Syria, obviously to other places around the world of criminal proceeds, and why this bill is so important. So I'm going to wrap up. Unlicensed, no KYC exchanges, peer-to-peer OTC crypto traders, mixing tumbling services, unlicensed virtual currency kiosks, and instant exchanges and swapping services are de facto money launderers. That is what they are doing. They are laundering funds for criminal enterprises, and they know that that is the business they are in. And we need the tools to go after them to either put them out of business or have them come into the same regulatory framework as everybody else. Enforcement will protect victims. It'll allow us to track victim funds across the blockchain, see where they went, seize them, and through bills like Senator Myrie's Ripoff Act, return them to victims. It'll allow us to protect the integrity of our financial system, to prevent our financial system from being used for money laundering, for narcotics trafficking, for terror financing, and it'll facilitate the investigation of these crimes by law enforcement in the ways that DA Bragg already talked about, by allowing us to actually further our investigations to see who's on the various sides of the transaction.